Hello, and welcome to GeoHoller, the internet guy who teaches you about the world. Today we're exploring religious diversity in America, using data mainly from the 2023-2024 Pew Research Religious Landscape Study to explain America's Christian decline and non-religious rise in the year 2026. Now, the state-level numbers aren't 100% exact. There is some margin of error for each state, but these are the best estimates we have, and they paint a fascinating picture. And just to be clear, this isn't a religious video per se. I'm not here to debate your beliefs, just to share the facts. So if that sounds interesting, stick around, and thank you for watching. Liar! I generally trust this data for two main reasons. Firstly, the Pew Research Center is widely regarded as a nonpartisan organization with strong survey methodology. Secondly, the United States has religious freedom, which means people are more willing to answer honestly. Historically, religious persecution, especially in Europe, after the Protestant Reformation, shows what happens when governments enforce their beliefs. That's one of the main reasons why the United States has no official religion under the First Amendment. James Madison, a founding father, once warned that the same authority that can establish one religion could just as easily exclude all others. While the United States isn't perfect, religious freedom allows for surveys like this to be conducted with far less fear of being persecuted. Anyway, back to the main data. The study divides Americans into three broad groups: Christians, people who follow other religions, and the religiously unaffiliated. Christians make up about 62% of the American adult population. The religiously unaffiliated are a notable 29%, and the other religions come in at around 7%. About 1% of people did not answer the survey, so I guess they ate it. Man, dinner sure does look delicious. Now, these numbers don't exactly add up to 100% because of rounding, but they're close enough for the purposes of this video. Let's start with the largest group, Christians.
Christ compels you!
What is a Christian exactly, though? At its core, Christianity is a monotheistic faith centered on the life teachings of Jesus Christ. Followers, known as Christians, regard Jesus as the Son of God and the Savior of humanity, with the Bible serving as their holy scripture. Christianity encompasses a wide range of traditions and denominations, including Protestantism, Catholicism, and Eastern Orthodoxy, along with several smaller branches, each with distinct beliefs and practices. For the purposes of this video, all of these groups are collectively referred to as Christian, following Pew Research's classifications. This also includes groups whose Christian status is debated by other Christians, such as the Latter-day Saints and Jehovah's Witnesses. Some of the states with the highest percentage of self-identified Christians include Arkansas and South Dakota at 79%, Mississippi and South Carolina at 77%, and Nebraska and Louisiana at 74%. Christianity is highly diverse and does not function as a single unified group, which brings us into the largest Christian tradition in America.
Jesus Christ is on his way back.
Protestantism is a branch of Christianity that originated as a movement to reform the Catholic Church, initiated by Martin Luther in what is now modern Germany during the 16th century. Protestants emphasized direct engagement with the Bible and faith in Jesus for salvation. When reform efforts failed, Protestant groups split from the Catholic Church, contributing to significant religious conflict in Europe. Anyway, back to the main data. Today, Protestants make up about 40% of the adult population in the United States. Pew breaks Protestants into three major groups: Evangelical Protestants, Mainline Protestants, and historically black Protestants. Evangelicals tend to be more theologically conservative and religiously observant. Mainline Protestants are generally more theologically liberal and less religiously active. Historically black Protestant churches developed largely due to segregation in the American South and tend to be more liberal on racial and economic issues while remaining more conservative on issues like abortion and LGBTQ topics. In total, evangelicals make up about 23.1% of Americans, mainline Protestants 11.5%, and historically black Protestants at 5.4%. But when you look at only Protestants, evangelicals swell to 58%, mainline Protestants at 29%, and historically black churches at 13%. Protestants can also be divided by denomination. The five largest Protestant traditions in the United States are Baptist at 30%, non-denominational churches at 18%, Pentecostal churches at 10%, Methodists at 9%, and Lutherans at 7%. When you include all Americans, not just Protestants, these groups make up about 12%, 7.1%, 3.9%, 3.5%, and 2.9% of the total population, respectively. Some Protestants are classified as non-Pacific Protestants, meaning they identify as Protestants but don't list the denomination. They make up about 4.2% of Americans, or roughly 10% of Protestants. The single largest Protestant denomination is the Southern Baptist Convention, representing 4.4% of Americans and about 11% of Protestants. The most Protestant states are concentrated in the Bible Belt and Deep South. Arkansas and Mississippi at 71%, followed by South Carolina at 69%, Alabama at 66%, and Tennessee at 63%. On the other end, Utah is just 8% Protestant, while several northeastern states, including Connecticut, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, New Jersey, and New Hampshire, all fall below 25%. Overall, New England and the Rocky Mountain West are less Protestant, while the South and much of the Midwest remain more Protestant. I could talk all day about Quakers, the Amish, or Appalachian snake handlers, but I must move on. Uh-oh.
Expect a kind of Spanish Inquisition? Nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition!
Catholicism is a branch of Christianity that shares core beliefs with Protestant Christians, such as belief in Jesus as the Son of God and the Bible as the Word of God. However, Catholics recognize the authority of the Pope, follow church tradition alongside Scripture, and practice 7 sacraments rather than the 2 observed by Protestants. They also believe in purgatory. It's like a really good album. It is also important to note that Catholicism functions as a single global denomination, rather than a collection of independent churches as is common within Protestantism. Catholics make up about 19% of the United States population, which technically makes Catholicism the largest Christian denomination in the United States. Baptists come in a close second when combining all Baptist traditions at around 12%. The most Catholic states include Rhode Island at 39%, Connecticut at 35%, New Jersey at 33%, New York at 29%, and New Mexico at 27%. The Northeast high Catholic populations, largely due to immigration from Catholic countries like Ireland and Italy. Border states and Florida also have large Catholic populations due to Hispanic immigration, which is often, but not always, Catholic. North Dakota and Illinois also have a relatively high Catholic population at 23%, while Louisiana's 22% Catholic presence represents its French colonial history. On the other end, states with the lowest Catholic populations include West Virginia at 3%, Utah at 4%, Arkansas and Mississippi at 5%, and Alabama at 6%, and North Carolina and Tennessee at 7%. Northwestern states such as Wyoming, Idaho, Montana, Washington, and Oregon also tend to have lower Catholic percentages, all below 15%. Alright, that was much easier to summarize than Protestants. Together, Protestants and Catholics make up about 92% of American Christians. But that raises an important question. What's the largest Christian group left? And what exactly are Utahns worshiping if it's only 12% Protestant and Catholic?
Oh.
Hello, ma'am.
How could one forget the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, often called the LDS Church, or more commonly known as the Mormons? The LDS Church has a distinct set of beliefs, and its status as Christian is debated among other Christians. However, Pew Research classifies anyone who identifies as Christian, which is why members of the LDS Church are included in this category. The state with the highest percentage of Mormons is Utah by far, at about 50%, followed by Idaho at 14%, and other states with notable LDS populations include Wyoming at 6%, Nevada and Arizona at 5%, and somewhat surprisingly, the state of Hawaii at 4%. Overall, Mormons are heavily concentrated in the western United States, with relatively small populations in most other regions of the country. And that just about summarizes Christianity in the United States. I can't cover every Christian group in one video, but one honorable mention goes to Eastern Orthodoxy. Orthodox Christians share many similarities with Catholics, but do not recognize the authority of the Pope, and differ on certain theological points, including the Nicene Creed. They also practice infant baptism, and they make up about 1% of the United States population. About 7% of Americans practice a religion other than Christianity. The largest groups include Judaism at 1.7%, Islam at 1.2%, Buddhism at 1.1%, Hinduism at 0.9%, other world religions at 0.3%, and those who selected something else at 1.9%. Other world religions include faiths such as Sikhism, Shintoism, and Zoroastrianism, traditions that are present in the United States but small enough that Pew Research groups them together. The something else category includes people who identify with beliefs like Unitarian Universalism, Deism, Humanism, Paganism, Wicca, Native American religions, or who describe themselves as spiritual but not religious, or as having their own beliefs. Now let's focus on the two largest non-Christian Abrahamic religions. Judaism makes up about 1.7% of the total U.S. population. It is a monotheistic faith centered on the belief in one God and adherence to the laws and teachings found in the Torah. Jews do not believe Jesus was the Messiah, and Jewish beliefs about the Messiah vary by tradition. It is also important to note that not all ethnic Jews practice Judaism, and not all followers of Judaism are ethnically Jewish. Judaism in the United States is commonly divided into three major movements: Reform, Conservative, and Orthodox. According to a 2013 Pew Research survey, which I know is a little bit older, but that's the only survey I could find on it, about 35% of religious Jews identified as Reform, 18% as Conservative, 10% as Orthodox, 6% as belonging to other branches, and around 30% reported no specific denomination. Jewish populations are heavily concentrated in a few states, particularly New York and New Jersey, where they make up about 5 and 6% of the population. Islam, as mentioned earlier, is practiced by about 1.2% of Americans. Followers of Islam, known as Muslims, believe in one God called Allah, and follow the teachings of the Quran, which Muslims believe was revealed to the Prophet Muhammad. Muslims regard Jesus as an important prophet, but not as divine. Islamic theology holds that earlier scriptures were originally inspired by God, but were not perfectly preserved over time. The two largest branches of Islam are Sunni and Shia. In the United States, Pew also categorizes the Nation of Islam in the branch, although many Muslims debate whether this represents Orthodox Islamic theology, a discussion that I am not qualified to talk about. Rather than being concentrated in a single state, Muslim populations in the United States are primarily urban, with large communities in cities like New York City, Chicago, and Los Angeles. One notable example is Dearborn, Michigan, which is one of the largest Muslim and Arab American populations in the country. Together, Judaism and Islam make up a small but significant proportion of the American religious landscape. This brings us into the two other major religions with roots further east: Hinduism and Buddhism. Buddhism is practiced by about 1.1% of Americans. Followers of Buddhism, known as Buddhists, generally do not focus on the belief in a creator god. Instead, Buddhism centers on the teachings of Buddha and emphasizes the path to overcome suffering. So basically, the average college student. Core concepts in Buddhism include the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, karma, rebirth, and the pursuit of nirvana. No, not that one. Rebirth in Buddhism differs from reincarnation in that there is no permanent soul that transfers from one life to the next. Hawaii has the highest percentage of Buddhists of any United States state, at around 5%, largely due to the large Asian American population. More broadly, Buddhist populations in the United States are centered in Western states. Hinduism makes up about 0.9% of the total United States population, and is one of the world's oldest religions, with roots stretching back over 3,000 years. Rather than a single unified belief system, Hinduism encompasses a wide range of rituals and practices. Some Hindus worship one supreme reality through many gods. Others focus on particular deities, such as Vishnu or Shiva, and some traditions are more philosophical or non-theistic. Concepts like karma, dharma, and reincarnation are central to many Hindu traditions. The state with the highest percentage of Hindus is surprisingly New Jersey, at 3%. In general, Hindu populations in the United States are concentrated in major metropolitan areas, much like Islam, and most American Hindus are part of the Indian diaspora. And that wraps up the other religions category, small but extremely diverse, which brings us into the final group, the religiously unaffiliated. The religiously unaffiliated are divided into three main groups: atheists, agnostics, and those who identify as nothing in particular. Atheists are people who do not believe in God. Agnostics are those who believe that the existence of God is unknowable or unknown. Those who identify as nothing in particular are not affiliated with any organized religion and may or may not believe in God. They simply don't identify with a certain faith. Altogether, the religiously unaffiliated make up about 29% of American adults. Of that group, roughly 5% are atheists, 6% are agnostics, and about 19% are nothing in particular. The most religiously unaffiliated states are New Hampshire at 48%, Vermont at 46%, and Oregon at 43%, all well above 40%. Regions with the highest proportions of religiously unaffiliated individuals include New England and the Mountain West, with the Midwest not far behind those two regions. In contrast, the Bible Belt stands out for having much lower levels of religious disaffiliation. The least religiously unaffiliated states include South Carolina at 16%, and Mississippi, Arkansas, and South Dakota, all around 18%. That covers all the major religious categories in the United States, but to really understand religion in America today, it's important to look at how these numbers have changed over time, especially since the first Pew Research religious landscape study in 2007, and what other factors influence changing religious beliefs in America. Pew Research examines many different demographics, but I'm going to focus on 5. Changes in the percentage of American adults who identify as Christian since 2007, religion by political identity, age, overall levels of religiousness, and finally, what the nation would look like if there was only 100 Americans. Let's start with the big picture. Since 2007, the United States has become 16% less Christian, 13% more religiously unaffiliated, and a smaller increase of 2% among other religions. Growth in other religions is largely driven by immigration from non-Christian countries, along with some Americans converting to different faiths. To better understand these shifts, we'll start with Christian demographics and examine the rise of the religiously unaffiliated. The decline in Christian identification is not evenly spread among all branches. Among Christians, Catholics and mainline Protestants have seen the largest decreases. Mainline Protestants dropped from 18% to 11%, a decline of nearly 39% among their members. This trend was consistent from 2007 through 2024. Catholics decreased from 24% to 19%, but their numbers have remained rather stable since 2014. Evangelical Protestants and historically black Protestants have experienced smaller declines of 3 percentage points and 2 percentage points. Since 2007, Mormons have remained roughly constant. Other Christian branches are too small to significantly affect the overall change. However, the decline of Christianity has stabilized since 2020. Let's take a closer look at Protestants to see how the shifts break down within this group. Protestant Christianity has declined in the United States. The share of Americans identifying as Protestant fell from 51.3% in 2007 to about 40% in 2024, a drop of roughly 11 percentage points. Within Protestantism itself, the decline of mainline churches is especially clear. In 2007, about 35% of Protestants identified as mainline. Today, that figure has dropped to around 29%, a decline of 6 percentage points. At the same time, when you just look at Protestants, evangelicals have grown, increasing from about 51% to 58%, a gain of 7 percentage points. Historically black Protestants have remained relatively stable around 13%. In short, while the overall Protestant population has shrunk since 2007, evangelicals now make up a larger share of those who still identify as Protestant. The share of Americans who are religiously unaffiliated has increased by about 13% since 2007. However, growth within this category has not been evenly distributed across the three main groups. Since 2007, all three subgroups have grown, but at very different rates. Those identifying as nothing in particular has increased by roughly 58%. Agnostics grew by about 150, and atheists saw the largest relative growth at approximately 200%. As a result, the internal makeup of the religiously unaffiliated has shifted. In 2007, about 75% of unaffiliated Americans identified as nothing in particular. Today, that figure has shrunk to around 63%, a decline of 12 percentage points. Over the same period, atheists increased from 13% to 20% of the unaffiliated population, a gain of 7 percentage points, while agnostics grew from 13 to 17%, a 4 percentage point rise. In short, while the religiously unaffiliated population as a whole is growing, atheism and agnosticism are expanding much more rapidly than the nothing in particular category. Now for everybody's favorite topic, politics. No, wait, please don't click away from this video. This isn't a political argument, I promise. That's on a different channel. Pew categorizes Americans into 3 broad political groups: conservatives, moderates, and liberals. These labels aren't perfect, but they do reveal a clear pattern in religious affiliation. Among conservatives, 82% identify as Christian, 4% follow other religions, and 13% are religiously unaffiliated. Among moderates, 61% are Christian, 7% belong to other religions, and 30% are religiously unaffiliated. Lastly, liberals have just 37% identifying as Christian, followed by other religions at 11%, and a whopping 51% being religiously unaffiliated. These differences highlight a strong association between political identity and religious affiliation in the United States. This also helps to explain trends within Christianity itself. Mainline Protestant churches, which tend to be more politically liberal, draw more heavily from liberals and moderates, groups that overall have lower rates of Christian identification. This is one reason for the long-term decline of Protestant mainline churches. There's also several other factors like internal theological divisions and denominational fragmentation. While identifying with a religion doesn't necessarily mean practicing it, which raises an important question: how religious are Americans in their daily lives? Religiousness by state can vary dramatically. This chart shows a percentage of American adults who are considered highly religious. Pew defines this using several factors: the importance of religion in daily life, religious attendance, frequency of prayer, and belief in God. In general, the most religious states are found in the American Bible Belt, with the exception of South Dakota and Utah because of, on the other end of the spectrum, the 3 least religious states are Vermont at 13%, New Hampshire at 15%, and Maine at 17%, all located in the generally less religious New England region. Oregon and Nevada also have relatively low rates of religiousness. Nationwide, the share of Americans who pray daily has declined since 2007. The daily prayer rate fell from 58% to 44%. Meanwhile, the share of adults who say they never pray or seldom pray has increased from 18% to 32%. The proportion of Americans who pray weekly or monthly remained relatively stable, with a slight increase of 1 point, going from 22% to 23%. One last demographic worth examining is the median age. One important thing to note is that this isn't a perfect measure. Some religious groups are relatively small, especially non-Christian religions and smaller Christian branches, so their median ages should be taken with a grain of salt. Larger groups, however, tend to be more accurate. The median age of the average American adult increased from 45 years old in 2007 to 48 years old in 2024. And just to clarify quickly, median age means about half the Americans are older than 48 and half are younger. Among Christians, the median age was 46 in 2007, just slightly older than the national average at the time. Today, however, the median age of a Christian is 54, which is 6 years older than the average American's median age. This shows that Christianity in the United States is aging faster than the general population. Some Christian groups skew even older. Protestant and Catholics both have a median age of 55, while the Protestant mainline are the oldest group at 59. Evangelicals match the Christian age at 54. However, not all Christian groups are older, though. Mormons and Eastern Orthodox Christians are younger, with median ages of 44 and 45. Historically Black Protestants are also slightly younger, with the median age of 49. Other religions in the United States tend to be younger overall, with the exception of Jews. Jews have a median age of 50. Muslims are the youngest group at 35, followed by Hindus at 39, and Buddhists at 45. The religiously unaffiliated are also younger on average. Agnostics have a median age of 36, atheists are at 38, and those identifying as nothing in particular come in at 39. Overall, this shows that the average Christian in America is aging, while other religions and the religiously unaffiliated skew younger. To visualize this more clearly, let's shrink down the American population just down to 100 people. If you were to shrink the entire United States population down just to 100 people, we get a much easier way to visualize everything we've talked about today. Out of the 100 Americans, 62 would be Christian. That includes 23 evangelical Protestants, 11 mainline Protestants, and 5 historically black Protestants, meaning 40 Protestants in total. There would also be 19 Catholics, 2 Mormons, and 2 Christians from other smaller traditions. Another 7 people would follow non-Christian religions. There would be 2 Jews, 1 Muslim, 1 Hindu, 1 Buddhist, and 2 other followers of other religions. The remaining 29 Americans would be religiously unaffiliated, including atheists, agnostics, and those who identify as nothing in particular, which Pew does not break down further in this visualization. These numbers match the percentages we discussed earlier, but things get even more interesting when we break this down by age. Among Americans aged 18 to 29, the religiously unaffiliated outnumber Protestants, there being 8 unaffiliated and only 5 Protestants. For those aged 30 to 49, the numbers are much closer, at 12 unaffiliated and 11 Protestants. Older generations, those 50 and up, are far more religious, with only 8 unaffiliated, while 23 of them are Protestant. When divided by gender, men tend to be more religiously diverse, while women are more likely to identify as Christian. Looking at ethnicity, white and black Americans are more likely to be Protestant, while Hispanic Americans are more likely to be Catholic. Asian Americans are the most religiously diverse group. In percentage terms, the share of Christians by ethnicity looks something like this. 64% of white Americans are Christian, 80% of black Americans are Christian, 73% of Hispanic Americans are Christian, and only 33% of Asian Americans are Christian. And here's all the charts that Pew Research made to show what America would look like with just 100 people. So we've covered a lot today, so let's quickly recap what all of this tells us about religion in America, especially going into 2026. In conclusion, the United States is a highly diverse nation, home to a wide range of religious beliefs and practices. Trends and percentages. Since 2007, the share of Christian adults has declined, but has stabilized somewhat since 2020. Overall, Protestant numbers have decreased, but the proportion of Protestants who identify as evangelical has grown. Catholics have also seen a decline, although their numbers have remained steady since 2014. Meanwhile, the religiously unaffiliated have increased significantly, especially atheists and agnostics. Other religions have seen a small rise of about 2%, largely due to immigration and conversion from Americans. Age. The median age of Americans is rising, but Christians are aging faster than the general population. Other religious groups and the religiously unaffiliated tend to be much younger. State and religious differences. Religion isn't evenly distributed across the country. Protestants are most common in the American South and Great Plains, while Catholics are concentrated in southern New England, New York, New Jersey, and the Midwest, and along the United States-Mexico border. Mormons are predominantly in Utah. Other religions are usually found in larger cities such as New York and Chicago, but can also have smaller regional strongholds like Dearborn, Michigan, with the large Muslim community. The Bible Belt and the Great Plains stand out as the most religious regions, while New England, the Rocky Mountain West, and West Coast are the least religious in the nation, showing a clear correlation between high religious unaffiliation and lower overall religiosity. America is diverse in faith, but what does the future hold? Will these trends continue, accelerate, or even reverse? Only the next survey in 2035, I guess, will tell. For now on, thank you for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more content from your favorite channel on this platform, I guarantee, GeoHoller.
Is this Charlie go to Tahiti?
Action! Oh, hello. I didn't expect to see you there. Anyway, this production took longer than August, obviously. Hopefully we'll be out by December. Hopefully not in 2026. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed. There's going to be more content on the way from GeoHoller, which is this guy right here. But the next video is going to be about the American South and where the borders are for that. So stay tuned. It'll be great. And yeah, hope you enjoyed unless you're Dylan. Anyway, I gotta get out of here.